Life story of Gautama Buddha. Vaisakha is a blessed month, as it is associated with the advent of three great sons of Mother India, Buddha, Sankara, and Ramanuja. Like the spring season, breathing new life into dry plants and trees, the very memory of these large-hearted souls brings peace and joy to a world sunk in misery. Siddhartha Gautama Buddha was born on a Vaisakha Purnami 560 years before Christ. At the foot of the Himalayas, on the borders of Nepal, there was a little kingdom with its capital at Kapilavastu, ruled over by the Sakyas, a clan which claimed descent from the solar race. King Suddhodana ruled the kingdom and had two wives, namely Maya and Prajapati, who were the daughters of the king of Kali. Queen Maya had many wonderful dreams, and in one of them she saw a great multitude of people bowing down to her. Wise men interpreted the dream and said that the queen would give birth to a son who would command the worship of the entire world. When the time neared for that glorious one's appearance, Queen Maya expressed her desire to go to her native city. On the way, she rested in a grove where she gave birth to the child who would later become the Buddha. 7 days after the birth of her son, who was named Siddhartha, Queen Maya died, leaving the child to be taken care of by her sister Prajapati. As he grew up, the king provided everything that would make his life cheerful. He would not even let a shadow of grief fall on the child's happy days. The wisest in the land were selected as his tutors. One day, it so happened that while he was in his garden, he saw a number of swans passing through the air. Suddenly, one of them fell wounded at his feet. He gently lifted it and drew the shaft from the wound. His cousin Devadatta had shot the bird and now claimed it as his own. But Siddhartha said that he who saved its life had a greater claim to it than he who sought to destroy it. He kept the bird, nursed it till it regained strength, and then sent it back to rejoin its kind. Another day, while he was looking at an insect on a blade of grass, it was suddenly devoured by a lizard. Soon after, a serpent appeared and caught hold of the lizard. Then followed a kite which carried off the serpent. This incident affected him deeply, and he asked himself, "Is this life?" As he grew up, he was often found to seek solitude and sit by himself for long hours. His father became anxious and consulted his ministers, who advised matrimony, saying that a young bride would cure him of this tendency. Accordingly, he was married to his cousin Yasodhara, one of the loveliest maidens. Siddhartha adored his beautiful bride, and the two lived happily together in the luxurious home which the king had provided. However, some years later, he wished to go and see the world outside the palace gates, which he had been hardly allowed to see. The king granted the request, but gave orders to his attendants that nothing unpleasant should be allowed to cross the prince's path. Things went according to the plan for a while, but later on, unexpectedly, some unpleasant sights presented themselves in quick succession. The gods seemed to have themselves come in disguise to summon Siddhartha to his predestined mission of alleviating the misery of the world. The prince saw sick people. He saw an old man whose palsied limbs and sunken eyes betrayed a deep but unspoken misery. Then he saw four persons carrying a dead body on a bier. He questioned his charioteer and understood that all human beings were bound to die someday, and that it was the way of the world. Siddhartha began to ask himself, is there no way out of all the sufferings the human beings are subject to? He then saw a sannyasin, serene of countenance, and came to understand that he was the one who had gone beyond the misery. Siddhartha spent a few years with a mind made heavy by restless thoughts about the misery of man's lot on earth. When he was 29, a son was born to him. However, he looked with disdain on the pleasures of the palace. When his wife entreated him to tell her the cause of his unrest of mind, he said, when I see suffering all around and find men grow old, sicken, and die, it is enough to take away the last hope of life and the love for pleasure. The king, learning of all this, was greatly overcome with sorrow and was afraid that Siddhartha might renounce the world and take to the ascetic life. Not long after the birth of the son, one night when all was quiet, the prince felt restless and going out into the garden, sat under a jambu tree, trying to calm his mind. He then had the vision of a holy man who seemed to tell him, you are the blessed one who have come to the world to save and redeem mankind. Now is the time. Fulfill your mission. Saying so, the vision vanished. The prince returned to his bedchamber. His mind was made up. He stood gazing at his wife and son, and tears flowed freely from his eyes. Swami Vivekananda described the supreme moment thus. What was the problem that vexed him? Why it was she whom he was about to sacrifice for the world? That was a struggle. He cared nothing for himself. Have you ever thought of the hearts of the heroes? How they were great, and soft as butter? Then he called Channa, his faithful charioteer, and asked him to bring Kantaka, his fearless horse. He mounted the steed and rode out, accompanied by Channa. The city was fast asleep, and none knew that Siddhartha was riding forth from his royal home into homelessness. When he came to the river Anoma, he halted, cut off his hair with his sword, and divested himself of his robes and ornaments. He gave the horse and valuables to Channa and asked him to give them to the king with his greetings and to tell him that all was well with the prince. Then he went on his road alone, begging his food, and after some time came to Rajagriha, the capital of the kingdom of Magadha, where King Bimbisara was ruling. People flocked to see Siddhartha, attracted by his noble bearing and beauty. The king also came to see him and told him, your hands are fit to grasp the reins of an empire. You should not hold a beggar's bowl. Siddhartha replied, better than sovereignty, better than heaven is the fruit of holiness. I pray you, pity me not. Pity rather those who are burdened with the cares of the world. The king bowed to him and said, may you obtain that which you seek, and having obtained it, come back, I pray you, and receive me as your disciple. In this quest, Siddhartha first came to two renowned teachers, Alara and Udraka, who were unsurpassed in learning and philosophical knowledge. But their learned disquisitions did not fully satisfy him. He moved on into the forest of Uruvela near the present Bodhagaya, where he met a group of 5 ascetics. In course of time, they were struck by Siddhartha's deep humanity and holiness, and they attached themselves to him as disciples. They marveled at the resolution and strength of mind which enabled him to continue his fasting and austerities for long periods of time. For 6 years, he continued his penances until his body was worn out and he became mere skin and bone. It began to dawn on him that his extreme penance was a mistake. He changed his way of life so as not to neglect the body any longer. The 5 ascetics who thought that he had broken his vow left him and went away to Banaras. Siddhartha had discovered the middle path. The sting of her stretched breaks, the music dies. The sting of her slack is dumb, and the music dies. Tune the sitar neither high nor low. He declared later on, one is a life of pleasure from which he who leadeth the religious life must abstain. It is base, ignoble, unspiritual. The other is a life of mortification. It is gloomy, unearthly, unreal. The perfect one, O Bhikshus, avoiding these extremes, has discovered the middle path, a path which openeth the eyes, which leadeth to knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana. During these days of loneliness, he was occasionally tempted to give up the struggle. Thoughts of home and wife and son used to rise in his mind. He understood that this was the temptation of Mara, the evil spirit, and fought resolutely against it. At times, he felt an assurance that the light would soon dawn, but again darkness and despair would possess his mind. In those days, he usually sat under an asatha tree on the banks of the river Niranjana. One morning, as he sat there, a young woman by name Sujata came with a bowl of rice cooked in milk as a votive offering to Asatha Narayana, who had blessed her with a son. When she saw Siddhartha seated there, she took him for the deity and offered him the bowl, which he accepted. That evening, which happened to be a Vaisakha Purnami, he made a seat of kusa grass and sat under the tree with a firm resolution. Let my body dry up in this seat. Let the skin and bone and flesh go back to their elements. Without attaining that knowledge, which is difficult to get even through ages of striving, this body shall not move from the seat. When one makes such a resolution, the dawn of knowledge cannot be far off. Gautama Siddhartha became the Buddha, the enlightened one. The asatha tree under which he attained enlightenment is called the Bodhi tree, and ever since countless pilgrims have visited that holy spot. The Buddha stayed there in solitude 7 times 7 days, enjoying the bliss of nirvana. Then he thought of his old teachers, who would be glad to see him. But they were dead. His 5 disciples were still alive, and he resolved to go to them first and proclaim the gospel of deliverance. At that time, they were living in the deer park at Banaras. He came to them and said, the Tathagata does not seek salvation in austerities, but for that reason you must not think that he indulges in worldly pleasures, nor does he live in abundance. To keep the body in good health is a duty, for otherwise we shall not be able to trim the lamp of wisdom and keep our mind strong and clear. Reading of the scriptures, making offerings to priests or sacrifices to gods, self-mortification by heat or cold, and many such penances do not cleanse the man who is not free from anger, bigotry, deception, envy, self-praise, and evil intentions. The Buddha then went to the Rajagriha to meet King Bimbisara. As he had promised, the king was persuaded to give up animal sacrifices and to practice ahimsa. With a large number of his subjects, he embraced the new religion, and this conversion of a ruler had a great influence. The movement grew rapidly. From Rajagriha, he went to Kapilavastu with his followers at the pressing invitation of his father. He was received by the ministers and members of the royal family with great reverence. But when Yasodhara hesitated to make her appearance, the Buddha went to her and spoke kindly to her before he left the palace. Many people joined the Sangha here too. Among them were Ananda, Siddhartha's half-brother, Devadatta, his cousin, Aniruddha, the philosopher, and Upali, the barber. Of all of them, Ananda was the one dearest to the heart of the Buddha. On the seventh day of his stay in Kapilavastu, Yasodhara sent her son Rahul to the Buddha, advising him to ask for his inheritance. The Buddha said, "I cannot give him perishable treasures. I can give him the inheritance of a holy life." Saying so, he accepted Rahul into the Sangha. The Buddha continued his ministrations, going from place to place. He used the mildest means, sympathy, kindliness, and love, and raised the morality of the people he met. He worked incessantly for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many. Once, a householder in Rajagriha got a precious bowl of sandalwood decorated with jewels. He erected a pole in front of his house and tied the bowl on its top. He proclaimed that if anyone brought it down without using a ladder or a stick or a missile, he would receive whatever he desired. Kasyapa, a disciple of the Buddha, performed a miracle and brought it down by a mere wish. But when the Buddha heard of this, he went to Kasyapa, broke the bowl, and forbade his disciples to perform miracles of any kind. A foolish man, learning that the Buddha observed the principle of love and of returning good for evil, came and abused him, wanting to provoke him. When the man had finished his abuse, the Buddha asked him, "Son, if a man declined to accept a present made to him, to whom would it belong?" And he answered, "To the man who offered it." The Buddha added, "My son, I decline to accept your abuse." Continuing, he said, "A wicked man who abuses a virtuous one is like the one who looks up and spits at the heaven. The spittle does not soil the heaven, but comes back and defiles his own person." One day, the Buddha went with his begging bowl to a farmer. The farmer looked displeased and said roughly, "I have plowed my field, sowed the seed, and gathered the grain, but you have done no work to earn your food." The Buddha replied, "I too have done my work." The farmer rejoined, "Then where is your plow and where are your oxen?" The Buddha said, "The seed I sow is faith. The rain that waters the seed is repentance. Wisdom is my plow and yoke. The oxen that draw the plow are diligence. With truth I cut away the weeds of sin and ignorance. My harvest is the fruit of immortality." Another day, the Buddha saw a monk in a monastery suffering from leprous sores, neglected by everyone. With the help of Ananda, he washed the sores of the monk and put him to bed. Then he called together the monks and spoke thus: Monks, ye have no mothers or fathers to take care of you. If you will not help each other and wait on each other, who will wait on you? Whosoever would wait on me, he should wait on the sick. In his 80th year, the Buddha visited Vaisali, where he accepted the invitation to dinner of Ambapali, a quotation in preference to the hospitality of the nobles. Thence he went to Belua. There he fell seriously ill, when Ananda asked him, with tears in his eyes, how the Sangha was to conduct itself when he was gone. He said, What does the Sangha expect of me, Ananda? I have preached the truth. I have no closed fist and have kept nothing back. I am now grown old and my journey is drawing to its close. O Ananda, be ye lamps unto yourselves. Hold fast as a refuge to the truth. And whosoever shall be lamps unto themselves, it is they who shall reach the topmost height. When he recovered, he proceeded to Pawa with his disciples, where he accepted the invitation of a blacksmith to a meal. After this, the Buddha was seized with acute dysentery. He did not want that his host should know about this. He reached Kusinara with utmost difficulty and rested in a grove of sala trees on a couch prepared by Ananda. The end came quickly. Ananda and other disciples stood by, weeping bitterly. The Buddha said, Enough, weep no more. All things must perish. We must be separated from things we hold dear. You have done well. You have acquired much merit. Continue to strive, and soon you will be free from the great evils. Think not when I am gone. The master is no more. We have a master no more. Think not thus. The truth, the law, which I have taught you, shall be your master when I am gone. So he passed into the great silence. Mahatma Gandhi says, I have heard it contended times without number that the Buddha did not believe in God. Such a belief contradicts the very central fact of the Buddha's teaching. He reinstated God in the right place. It is my deliberate opinion that the essential parts of the teaching of the Buddha now form an integral part of Hinduism. It is impossible for Hindu India now to retrace her steps and go beyond the great reformation that Gautama Buddha effected in Hinduism. By his immense sacrifice, by his great renunciation, and by the immaculate purity of his life, he left an indelible impress on Hinduism.